The coffee mug was still warm. At 2:37 in the morning, in an empty office building, someone had just been here. And what David found when he followed the sound of crying would expose a truth that's destroying millions of hardworking people across America. This is that story. Like, subscribe, and share for more stories that matter. David Patterson was 35 and looked every bit the successful tech entrepreneur. Designer stubble, casual hoodie over a $200 shirt. The kind of relaxed appearance that came from having nothing left to prove. He had sold his first startup at 28 and used that money to build Horizon Tech, a software company that now employed over 300 people across 2 office buildings in downtown Seattle. Tonight, insomnia and anxiety about tomorrow's investor presentation had driven him from his apartment to his office, seeking the strange comfort of familiar spaces in unfamiliar hours. The night security guard had waved him through without question. David often showed up at odd hours. What wasn't usual was finding evidence of life on the 4th floor, the accounting and customer service wing that should have been completely vacant except for the cleaning crew that usually finished by midnight. David picked up the mug, still warm. He looked around the break room and noticed other small details he might have missed. A charging phone cable plugged into the wall outlet beneath the counter. A reusable grocery bag tucked behind the coffee maker. A sweater draped over the back of a chair. These weren't things left behind accidentally. These were things placed deliberately by someone who planned to return. Then he heard it. The unmistakable sound of quiet crying coming from somewhere down the hall. David's pulse quickened. His mind raced through possibilities. Medical emergency, personal crisis, something worse. He moved quickly but carefully down the darkened hallway, his expensive sneakers silent against the carpeted floor. The sound led him to a small office at the end, a workspace belonging to one of the junior accountants according to the nameplate on the door. Jessica Martinez. The door was cracked open, and soft light spilled into the hallway from a desk lamp inside. "Hello," David called out gently, not wanting to startle whoever was inside. "Is everything all right? Do you need help?" The crying stopped instantly, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. David heard movement. The scrape of a chair, hurried footsteps, the rustle of fabric. Then a young woman appeared in the doorway, her face flushed and streaked with tears, her brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized Horizon Tech Company t-shirt from last year's employee appreciation event. Her eyes went wide with recognition and fear when she saw him standing there. "Oh God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Oh no, please, I can explain everything." David recognized her immediately. Jessica Martinez. She'd been hired 8 months ago, fresh out of college with a finance degree and a determination that had impressed everyone in the interview process. He remembered her because she'd asked intelligent questions about the company's growth trajectory and long-term vision. Questions that showed she was thinking beyond just getting a job. "Jessica, what are you doing here at this hour? Are you okay?" "I'm completely fine," she said too quickly, wiping frantically at her face with her sleeves. "I was just catching up on some reports. Lost track of time. I'll leave immediately." But David had already seen past her into the small office, and what he saw made his stomach drop and his chest tighten with a feeling he couldn't quite name. The couch against the wall wasn't just office furniture anymore. It had been transformed into a makeshift bed. A pillow, a neatly folded blanket, sheets tucked carefully around the cushions with the kind of precision that spoke of practice and routine. On the desk beside her laptop were personal items that didn't belong in an office. Toiletries including a toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, face wipes, a small electric kettle, a stack of instant oatmeal packets, a bag of apples, a water bottle. Jessica followed his gaze and her entire face crumbled. Fresh tears began streaming down her cheeks as she realized there was no hiding what he'd discovered. "Please don't fire me," she said, her voice raw with desperation. "Please, I know I'm not supposed to be here like this. I know this violates every policy in the handbook. But I didn't know what else to do, and I've been so careful not to let it affect my work. I swear I'll leave right now and never come back after hours. Just please don't fire me. I need this job." David felt something crack open in his chest. A mixture of shock, anger at a situation he didn't fully understand yet, and an overwhelming sense that he was standing at the edge of something important. "Jessica, slow down. Take a breath. Nobody's firing you. I just need you to talk to me. Help me understand what's going on here." Jessica wrapped her arms around herself like she was trying to physically hold herself together. Her whole body was trembling. "You're going to think I'm pathetic. You're going to think I'm a failure. I promise you I won't think either of those things," David said quietly, and he meant it. "But I need to know the truth. Have you been living here? In your office?" Jessica couldn't speak. She just nodded, her chin trembling as she fought to keep from completely breaking down. David looked down the empty hallway, then back at Jessica standing in the doorway of her office that had become her home. He made a decision. "Can I come in? Can we sit down and talk about this properly?" Jessica hesitated, clearly torn between wanting to run and knowing she'd already been caught. Finally, she stepped aside, her movements small and defeated. David entered the office and took in more details now that he was inside. A small trash bag tied carefully and placed by the door, ready to be taken out so no one would notice extra garbage. Her work clothes for the next day hanging neatly on the back of the door, a pressed blouse and slacks. Everything was organized with an almost obsessive level of care. Everything was clean. Everything was maintained with a kind of desperate dignity that made David's throat tight. He sat down in the desk chair and gestured for Jessica to take the couch. She perched on the very edge, her body language screaming that she was ready to bolt at any moment. "How long has this been going on?" David asked gently. 6 weeks, Jessica whispered, staring at her hands. "Almost 7. Tell me what happened. Tell me everything." Jessica took a shaky breath, and when she started talking, the words came out in a flood, like a dam breaking after holding back too much pressure for too long. "I moved here from Texas for this job. It was my dream opportunity, working for a respected tech company, finally using my degree, making what I thought was decent money for the first time in my life. My mom was so proud when I got the offer. She threw me a party. I cried for an hour because I couldn't believe this was really happening to me." She wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her shirt, leaving dark streaks of mascara. "I found an apartment in Bellevue. It wasn't fancy or anything, but it was mine. Well, sort of mine. I was sharing it with 2 other girls to make the rent work. It was still expensive, even split 3 ways. But everything was fine for the first couple months. I was happy. I was finally independent, finally building a real career." David listened, watching her struggle to maintain composure while reliving whatever had brought her to this point. "Then about 7 weeks ago, one of my roommates lost her job," Jessica continued, her voice getting tighter. "She couldn't find anything else quickly enough, so she had to move back home to California to live with her parents. Then, like a week later, my other roommate decided to move in with her boyfriend. Just like that. They didn't even give me much notice. Suddenly, I was stuck with a lease I couldn't afford alone on my entry-level salary. Rent in Seattle is insane. This apartment was $2,100 a month. I make $42,000 a year before taxes. Do the math on that." David was doing the math, and he didn't like what the numbers were telling him. "I tried everything," Jessica said, and desperation crept into her voice. "I posted everywhere looking for new roommates, but the apartment was in a sketchy neighborhood, and nobody wanted to move in there. I talked to the landlord about breaking the lease, but that would have cost me thousands in penalties and destroyed my credit, which would have made it impossible to rent anywhere else. I looked for cheaper places, but every single one wanted first month, last month, and security deposit up front. That's like $4,000 minimum that I just didn't have. And I've got student loans, $350 a month. Car payment, $270. Insurance, gas, food. I sat down one night and did the math on everything, and I realized I couldn't make it work. Not on what I'm making now. Not in this city. Why didn't you reach out for help?" David asked, though he was starting to suspect he knew the answer. "We have HR resources. We have employee assistance programs. We have." "I did reach out," Jessica interrupted, and there was something sharp in her voice now. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. 6 weeks ago, I went to HR and asked if there were any hardship programs or emergency loans available. I explained my situation. I told them I just needed help with moving costs for a cheaper place, and I'd pay it back over time. You know what they told me? David shook his head, already dreading the answer. They told me company policy didn't allow loans to employees because it creates complications with payroll and taxes. They gave me a pamphlet about budgeting. They gave me a list of social services in the area: food banks, homeless shelters, crisis counseling. Like that was supposed to help someone with a full-time professional job. I left that office feeling like I'd done something wrong by even asking. David felt anger flash through him, not at Jessica, but at a system he'd created without fully thinking through its implications. At policies that sounded reasonable in a conference room but failed catastrophically in real life. "So what did you do?" he asked quietly. "I gave up the apartment," Jessica said flatly. "Let the roommates off the lease early. Moved my stuff into a storage unit. That's another $120 a month, by the way. Put what I absolutely needed in my car. And I started staying here." She gestured around the small office with a bitter little laugh. "I figured it was temporary, right? Just until I could save up enough for a new place. I have building access for my job. I'm supposed to be able to come and go as needed. I know the security patterns. I know when the cleaning crew finishes. I come in after they leave around midnight, and I'm always out before anyone else arrives in the morning around 7. I shower at the 24-hour gym 2 blocks away. $30 a month membership, cheapest one I could find. I keep all my stuff in my car during the day so nobody gets suspicious. At night, I only bring in what I absolutely need." "And your work?" David asked, though he already knew the answer. He'd seen Jessica's performance reviews just last week. She was in the top tier of her department. "I've been doing everything I possibly can to prove I deserve to be here," Jessica said, and there was naked desperation in her voice now. "I come in early every single day. I stay late. I volunteer for extra projects nobody else wants. I double-check everything I do. My numbers are good, aren't they? I've been hitting all my targets, exceeding most of them. I thought if I could just work hard enough, be valuable enough, save enough money, I could fix this before anyone found out. Before anyone could judge me for it." David looked at this young woman. This talented, hardworking, dedicated employee who had been secretly homeless for almost 7 weeks while maintaining perfect performance reviews. And he realized something that hit him like a physical blow. Jessica wasn't the problem. Jessica wasn't failing. The system was failing her. He had built a successful company and congratulated himself on offering competitive salaries and good benefits, never once stopping to consider whether his entry-level employees could actually afford to live with dignity in one of the most expensive cities in America. "Jessica, I need to ask you something, and I want complete honesty," David said carefully. "Have you been eating enough? Are you safe? Are you healthy?" That simple question, asked with genuine concern rather than judgment, was apparently what finally broke through Jessica's defenses completely. Her face crumpled, and she put her hands over her eyes as sobs racked her body. "I'm so tired," she choked out between gasps. "I'm tired all the time. I can't sleep properly because I'm always terrified someone's going to find me. Every sound in the hallway makes me panic. I can't really cook, so I'm living on protein bars and instant oatmeal and whatever doesn't need refrigeration. I eat, but it's not real food. Not healthy food. I take my multivitamins every day. I try to take care of myself. I really do. But I'm so tired and I'm so scared all the time, and I feel like I'm failing at everything even though I'm trying harder than I've ever tried at anything in my entire life." David stood up and grabbed the box of tissues from the desk, setting it beside Jessica on the couch. He didn't try to stop her crying or rush her through it. He just waited, feeling the weight of his own ignorance settle heavily on his shoulders. He had walked past Jessica in the hallways dozens of times over the past months. He'd smiled at her in meetings. He'd complimented her work in performance reviews. He'd approved her excellent ratings. And he had never once noticed that she was drowning right in front of him. After several minutes, Jessica's crying quieted to hiccups and shaky breaths. She pulled out a handful of tissues and wiped at her face, not meeting David's eyes. "Jessica, Look at me, David said gently but firmly. She slowly raised her red, swollen eyes to meet his. You are not failing. Do you hear me? You are surviving impossible circumstances with more grace and strength and resourcefulness than most people could ever manage. And what's happening to you is not your fault. But I should have been smarter with money, Jessica protested weakly. I should have saved more. I should have. Stop, David interrupted, his voice kind but absolute. You got a college degree. You got a good job at a reputable company. You're working hard every single day. You're doing everything society tells you you're supposed to do to be successful. The fact that you still can't afford basic housing and are sleeping on an office couch isn't a failure of your character or your intelligence. It's a failure of the system. And more specifically, it's a failure of my leadership that I didn't see this could happen to my own employees. Jessica stared at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand. Here's what's going to happen, David continued, his mind already working through solutions. First thing, you're not sleeping here anymore. Not tonight, not ever again. Right now, we're getting you into a hotel room on the company card. A nice one with a real bed and a real shower and room service if you want it. Tomorrow, we're going to start looking for a real apartment for you, and the company is going to help with the moving costs as a one-time relocation assistance package. It's not a loan. You're not paying it back. It's an investment in a valued employee who deserves better than what she's been dealing with. I can't accept that, Jessica said automatically, even as hope flickered in her eyes. That's too much. That's not fair to the other employees. I can't. You can and you will, David said firmly. But that's not all. You've also just helped me realize something crucial. If this is happening to you, it's probably happening to other people here too. People who are too scared or too proud to say anything. So we're going to conduct a comprehensive salary audit for all entry-level and junior positions. And we're implementing a housing stipend program for employees making under a certain threshold. Because nobody working full-time for my company should be homeless or one bad month away from homelessness. That's completely unacceptable. And I should have thought about this a long time ago. Jessica's mouth fell open in shock. You're going to give people raises and housing help because of me? I'm fixing a massive problem that I should have noticed months ago, David corrected. You just helped me see it clearly for the first time. You showed me that all the competitive salary data and industry benchmarks in the world don't mean anything if my employees can't actually afford to live with dignity in the city where they work. Over the next hour, David and Jessica worked out the immediate practical details. David personally booked her a room at a nice hotel near the office for the next week. He sent an email to his head of HR and CFO marking it urgent for an 8 a.m. meeting the next morning. He made notes about policy changes that needed to happen immediately. And he listened, really listened, as Jessica talked about the small indignities and fears that had become her daily reality over the past 6 weeks. There's one more thing, David said as they were wrapping up. I want you to take tomorrow off. Paid. Go to the hotel, sleep in a real bed, order whatever food you want and rest. Don't think about work. Don't worry about anything. Just take care of yourself. But the quarterly reports are due, and I'm in the middle of. Jessica, David said gently, the reports can wait one day. You can't. Take the day. That's not a request from a concerned CEO. That's an order from your boss. Jessica nodded, tears starting again, but different tears this time. Tears of relief rather than despair. 2 months later, Jessica Martinez was thriving in her own one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood with good public transit access. The apartment had natural light, a real kitchen, and enough space that she could actually breathe. More importantly, David had followed through on everything he'd promised and more. The salary audit had revealed what David had suspected. Nearly 40% of Horizon Tech's entry-level employees were struggling financially, with many working second jobs or living in inadequate housing situations. Some were living with parents despite being college graduates with professional jobs. Others were crammed into apartments with too many roommates. A few were in situations similar to Jessica's, though maybe not quite as extreme. David implemented what became known internally as the Living Wage Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to ensure every Horizon Tech employee could actually afford to live in Seattle with dignity. Entry-level salaries were increased by an average of 18%. A housing stipend program was created that provided additional monthly support for employees below a certain income threshold. An emergency assistance fund was established with clear, compassionate guidelines and no judgment attached. Financial counseling services were brought in to help employees navigate budgeting, debt management, and saving strategies. But more than the programs and the money, David's entire approach to leadership had fundamentally shifted. He started conducting monthly real talk sessions where he randomly selected employees from all levels and departments to have informal, confidential conversations about their lives, their challenges, and their needs. What he learned shocked him. He met single parents who were skipping meals so their kids could eat, even though they had good jobs at his company. He met employees who were avoiding necessary medical care because the high-deductible health insurance plans made it too expensive. He met people working second and third jobs just to make ends meet despite having full-time professional positions. He met talented, hardworking people who were exhausted and scared and barely hanging on. Each conversation changed him a little more. Each story reminded him that spreadsheets and profit margins and growth targets meant nothing if the people making that success possible weren't okay. The small office where he'd found Jessica that night was converted into a wellness room, a quiet space where any employee could go for privacy, rest, meditation, or just a moment of peace during difficult days. The room had comfortable seating, soft lighting, noise-canceling features, and a small selection of stress relief items. A simple plaque mounted beside the door read, "Success means nothing if our people aren't okay." Jessica herself became an unofficial advocate within the company, though she never shared the specific details of her own story publicly. She just made it known that she was available if anyone ever needed someone to talk to about financial stress or housing problems. Several employees quietly reached out to her over the following months, and she helped connect them with the resources David had put in place. The culture at Horizon Tech transformed fundamentally over the course of that year. It became known not just as a successful software company, but as a company that genuinely cared about its people. Employee retention improved dramatically. Productivity increased. Morale shifted from adequate to genuinely positive. And word got around, Horizon Tech became one of the most sought-after employers in Seattle, with top talent actively seeking positions there not just for the interesting work, but for the knowledge that they would be treated as whole human beings rather than just resources. Other tech companies started asking questions. How had Horizon achieved such low turnover? What was their secret to high employee satisfaction? David was invited to speak at conferences and write articles about the transformation. But he always came back to the same point. I found one of my best employees crying in her office at 2 a.m. because she'd been homeless for 6 weeks while working full-time for me. That's not a success story about her resilience. That's a failure story about my leadership. Everything we've done since then has been about making sure that never happens again. David never forgot what Jessica taught him that night, that you cannot judge people's struggles by their performance at work, because often the strongest, most capable people are the ones hiding the deepest pain. That hard work and talent and dedication don't protect you from systemic failures. That sometimes the people who look like they have it all together are barely holding on. And that true leadership isn't about maximizing productivity. It's about creating conditions where people can actually thrive. And Jessica never forgot that sometimes when you're doing everything right and still failing, the problem truly isn't you. That asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. That there are people who will see your worth even when you're at your lowest. And that sometimes the worst night of your life can become the catalyst for changes that help not just you, but countless others facing similar struggles. 3 years later, the Living Wage Initiative had become a model studied by companies across the country. Jessica had been promoted twice and was now a senior financial analyst with a healthy savings account, a car she owned outright, and enough stability to help her younger sister pay for college. And David had expanded the program to include mental health support, childcare assistance, and education benefits, creating a comprehensive approach to employee well-being that recognized that people are not just workers. They're whole human beings with complex lives and real needs. The coffee mug that started it all, the one David had found still warm that night, sat on his desk as a reminder. He'd asked Jessica if he could keep it, and she'd laughed and said yes. Whenever he was making decisions about company policies or financial priorities, he looked at that mug and remembered what it represented. Someone who was invisible until she wasn't. Someone who was struggling in silence until someone finally heard her. Someone who deserved so much better than what the system was giving her. And that reminder kept him honest, kept him focused on what really mattered, kept him asking the right questions and pushing for the right changes. Because leadership, he had learned, isn't about being the smartest person in the room or making the most money or building the biggest company. It's about creating a place where people don't have to choose between their dignity and their survival, where hard work actually leads to stability, where everyone, from the CEO to the newest entry-level employee, can look at themselves in the mirror and know they're being treated fairly. That's what Jessica taught him, and that lesson changed everything. If this story hit you right in the heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about real people facing real struggles in today's economy. Share this with your friends, your family, your boss. Anyone who needs to understand that working hard doesn't automatically equal financial security anymore. Drop a comment telling us about a time you struggled in silence, or a time someone finally saw what you were going through and helped. Your story matters. Someone out there is going through exactly what you went through, and they need to know they're not alone. Like, subscribe, and share for more stories that matter. See you in the next one.